never thought I would be here writing about something like this. When I met my fiancée, I truly believed she would be the person I'd spend the rest of my life with. We met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's party, and from the beginning, the connection was different. It wasn't that cliché of love at first sight, but rather a feeling of comfort, of being in the right place, as if I had finally found someone who understood me. She was funny, intelligent, had strong opinions, but also a sweetness that disarmed me. I had always been a bit closed off, but with her I began to open up in ways I never imagined. After 2 years together, we decided to get engaged. The decision felt natural, nothing forced. I already saw myself building a life by her side, and when I bought the ring, I remember feeling almost childlike happiness, as if I were about to fulfill a dream. Her reaction when I proposed was exactly what I had hoped for. Tears, a tight hug, a yes that made me believe everything was on the right path. The first cancellation happened a year after our engagement. Everything was ready for the civil ceremony and a small party with our closest family and friends. Suddenly, she started saying she didn't feel prepared, that she needed a little more time. I was devastated, but at the same time, I wanted to be understanding. After all, marriage is a huge step, and everyone has their own pace. So I swallowed my pride and said it was fine, that we would wait. Canceling everything was humiliating, especially because we had already sent invitations, made reservations, and explained everything to our parents. But I convinced myself it was just nerves. In the following months, things went back to normal. She seemed calmer, and our relationship, in a way, even grew stronger. We talked a lot, planned trips, discussed children, house, future. When we set a new date, I really believed it would be different. I believed her words. Now I'm ready. But a few weeks before the ceremony came the second cancellation. It was like a punch in the stomach. This time, the excuse was similar. She said she loved me, but wasn't secure yet, that she was afraid something would go wrong, that she needed more time to let the idea sink in. I remember being in shock. I tried to argue, to show her we had already built so much together, that there was no reason for such fear. But she cried, said she couldn't explain it, only that she wasn't ready. I thought about ending things right then. I was tired, frustrated, embarrassed in front of my family, my friends, who had started looking at me with pity. But deep down, I still loved her. Still. And something inside me told me that maybe, just maybe, she really did need more time. So I accepted again. The third cancellation, however, was what truly broke me inside. Everything was ready, venue paid, catering contracted, photographers reserved, clothes chosen, guests confirmed. I had invested not only money, but also my hope, my energy, my heart. I believed that this time nothing could go wrong. But just a few days before the wedding, she sat me down and repeated almost the exact same words. I love you, but I need more time. Only this time, the phrase sounded different. It was no longer a reasonable request, no longer anxiety. It was an escape. I saw in her eyes that there was no conviction, only fear, and maybe even doubt about us. The worst part was the way she said it, as if she were apologizing for missing a casual meeting, not for destroying an entire life plan. I sat there in silence, trying to process. Trying. My body trembled, and a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief took over me. For the third time, I would have to call family, friends, vendors, and invent excuses. For the third time, I would have to deal with the pitying looks, the questions, the shame. I didn't yell, I didn't fight, I just stayed quiet. She cried, held my hand, begged me to understand. And I, like an idiot, could only think about how I had let myself be fooled again. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, asking myself how many more times I was willing to go through that. The answer seemed obvious, but the heart insists on complicating what the mind already knows. After the third cancellation, my life turned into a whirlwind. It felt like I was walking in circles, always coming back to the same point, unable to escape. I woke up every day with a mix of anger and emptiness, but at the same time with that strange desire to believe things could be different. The problem was that, deep down, I no longer trusted her words. I need more time had become almost a cruel joke, a repeated phrase that hurt more each time. The relationship began to change. I became more distrustful, more distant, but still couldn't simply end it. Whenever I thought about breaking up, I remembered the good moments we had shared, the trips, the laughter, the way she looked at me on nights when she seemed to truly love me. Those memories held me down like invisible chains. I was afraid of losing it, afraid of throwing away years of relationship and regretting it later. My family, however, no longer hid their dissatisfaction. My mother was the first to tell me outright, she's not going to marry you, she's just stringing you along. I got irritated at the time, defended my fiancé, said it was easy to talk when you weren't in the relationship. But deep down, her words echoed inside me. My father, always more reserved, just looked at me with a heavy expression, as if he felt pity. My friends, some had already given up on advising me. Others simply drifted away, tired of seeing me insist on something that seemed to have no way out. At work, my performance dropped. My head was always somewhere else. Colleagues asked if I was okay, and I would force a smile, say yes, when in truth I was falling apart inside. I felt like I was living a parallel life, on the outside, keeping up appearances, inside, crumbling little by little. The worst of all was the shame. It's hard to explain the weight of having to give explanations to so many people. Guests who had already bought clothes, relatives who had traveled for the previous wedding, colleagues who asked enthusiastically how the preparations were going, and me, always making up excuses. I said there was a problem with the venue, that something had come up, that we decided to postpone for financial reasons. I never had the courage to admit the truth, that my fiancé simply didn't want to get married. After the third cancellation, I began noticing small details I had ignored before. The way she changed the subject when we talked about the future, the way she seemed relieved when the wedding was postponed, as if she had gotten rid of a burden. She said she loved me, but her behavior didn't match her words. I began to question everything. Does she really love me? Or is she just afraid of being alone? Am I just her comfort zone? I even considered that maybe there was someone else. I never found proof, but the insecurity gnawed at me. Any unexplained outing turned into suspicion of betrayal. Not because I wanted to distrust her, but because my trust was already so broken that anything seemed suspicious. And living like that is suffocating. One day, after another argument about the future, she told me something that stuck with me. I don't want to lose you, but I can't get married right now. That phrase stuck in my head. I realized she wanted to keep me around, but without truly committing. And I, afraid of losing her, was accepting crumbs of presents instead of demanding clarity. Little by little, I started realizing how much I was erasing myself in this relationship. I had dreams, plans, desires. I wanted to start a family, have kids, build a house, travel the world. But all those dreams were on hold, in eternal pause, because the person I was with didn't have the courage to take a step forward. And me, instead of moving on alone, preferred to wait, fooling myself into thinking that one day she would be ready. It was at that moment I began reflecting on what love really means. Is love accepting anything just to keep someone around? Or is love also about self-respect, the ability to say, enough, when the other person can't reciprocate? Those questions kept me up for many nights. I looked at her sleeping next to me and wondered, will she ever really say yes? Or am I just living a story that will never have a happy ending? There were times I tried to have more serious talks, asking for clear answers. I asked directly, do you really want to marry me? Or are you just afraid of losing me? She cried, said she wanted to, but that fear was stronger. And I, for some reason, still accepted that excuse. Maybe because the idea of breaking up hurt more than the idea of continuing to suffer. The third cancellation was, without a doubt, a turning point. I started realizing I couldn't live in this cycle forever. That if I didn't make a decision, my whole life would be an endless postponement, always waiting for something that might never come. But making that decision is easier in theory. In practice, it means facing deep fears. The fear of being alone, the fear of admitting I invested years in something that didn't work, the fear of other people's judgment. Those fears paralyzed me, and it was exactly that which kept me tied to her. I began to feel like a spectator in my own life, watching everything pass by, but unable to take control. And with each passing day, that feeling grew stronger. After the third cancellation, something inside me began to change irreversibly. I could no longer look at my fiancée the same way. I still loved her. Yes, but it was as if a part of me had broken for good. The trust, the certainty, the admiration, it all dissolved little by little, like sand slipping through my fingers. I felt that even though she was physically by my side, she wasn't really with me anymore. I spent weeks trying to act as if nothing had happened. We went out to dinner, watched movies, visited friends, but it was as if a ghost sat between us, constantly reminding me of what didn't happen. I tried to fool myself, tried to believe that with time, things could go back to normal. But every time she held my hand or said, I love you, a voice inside me whispered, If she really loved you, she wouldn't have left you in that situation 3 times. Conversations about the future practically disappeared. I avoided bringing it up, and when, rarely, something about marriage, kids, or plans came up, she changed the subject, pretended not to hear, or answered with vague phrases. And I, tired, simply let it slide. I no longer had the strength to insist. I also began to feel anger. Not the explosive kind, but a silent, corrosive anger. Anger at myself for allowing it to get this far. Anger at her for never being clear, for always hiding behind the phrase, "I need more time." Anger at the situation, for having wasted so much money, so much effort, so much love, for nothing. One night, in the middle of a random dawn, I woke up and stared at her sleeping. That was the moment I finally realized the problem was no longer her fear of marriage. The problem was me for continuing to accept a life of uncertainty. I had no more doubts. She could cancel the wedding 10 times if I let her, and I would be the fool who kept waiting. The next morning, when I woke up, I made a decision I never thought I'd have the courage to make. I waited for her to leave for work, sat in the living room, and wrote a letter. Not because I couldn't say the words face to face, but because I knew that if I looked at her, I would weaken. In the letter, I said everything, that I loved her, but I couldn't keep living in that emotional prison, that I understood her fears, but I also needed to respect my own dreams, that I could no longer accept living in an eternal almost. When she came home and read the letter, she cried like she never had before. She begged me to reconsider, said this time she would change, that now she was truly ready, but I didn't believe her. 3 times had already been enough to prove that words weren't enough. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, "I can't do this anymore." The ending wasn't pretty. In the days that followed, she tried to talk to me several times, but I kept my distance. I blocked messages, refused calls. I knew that if I kept listening, I might fall into the trap of believing again, and I didn't want to believe anymore. The following weeks were painful. The house felt empty, the silence heavy, and I asked myself constantly if I had done the right thing. Sometimes I remembered the good moments and felt the urge to go back, but all it took was remembering the 3 times I was devastated, alone, having to explain to others why the wedding was canceled, and I was back to reality. Little by little, I began to rebuild my life. I reconnected with friends I had distanced from, visited family, dove into work. I discovered hobbies I had forgotten I liked. It was hard, but I realized there was still life after her, that my future wasn't destroyed, it just needed to be rebuilt. Today, looking back, I feel a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for losing years believing in something that never happened, but relief for finally having the courage to say, enough. I could have continued in that cycle indefinitely, maybe forever, and I would probably be unhappy, living off empty promises. I still think about her, I won't lie. Love doesn't disappear overnight. But along with the love came the lesson. I learned there's no point holding on to someone who isn't ready. I learned I deserve someone who knows what they want, who isn't afraid to truly be with me. I learned that respecting myself is more important than waiting for someone who can't decide. Writing this, I realized that deep down, I always knew this would be the outcome. I just didn't want to accept it, but now I do. And maybe this is the first time, in a long time, that I feel at peace.